All right, there we go. So, nice to finally talk to you, man.
Yes.
Endtime support group. I've seen you all over my Twitter feed.
Yeah, are we on the air?
Yeah, we're live right now.
Oh,
Please
yeah.
respect the rules. Don't say anything racist or anything.
Oh, no, not really. I don't know. We're going to have to cut this conversation short then.
That's funny. So, are you a right winger or a left winger?
I'm on the left, but we're a comedy show.
Oh,
Um,
so you do a comedy show. Is that why your picture was It the Clown?
uh-huh.
Okay, that's cool.
Yeah, we do a
So,
comedy show, so that's why I asked about the cursing, because if I don't have a dick joke, uh,
no, you can. It's fine to
my
curse on
audience
here.
is
No,
going to get confused.
oh, so you're live on your end too?
Yeah. Well, no, not live. I'm recording, though.
Okay, cool. So yeah, let's talk about this. The 2000 election conspiracy theory, or I call it a conspiracy theory. It sounds like you heavily disagree with me on that.
Yeah, yeah. Well, not only that, I mean, you could Google Bush stole 2000 uh, conspiracy theory, and you're not going to find anything that says that. So, I mean, this is an unusual thing that seems to be
I
said by
don't care
three.
if it's usual or not. It's more whether or not it's grounded in actual reality. And you're gonna have to give me a little more detail on how Bush stole the election.
Well, I think the felon purge was probably the main factor. You have 12,000 votes of
Hmm.
legally registered voters who didn't, who weren't allowed to vote, and that
Well,
was
yeah, and
through.
that I was looking into this the other day, and yeah, I read this really interesting article actually from Politico talking a little bit about that, and yeah, what happened with the voter purge was totally unfortunate, and it was a blatant example of voter suppression, but that does not at all prove your claim that Bush stole the election. You know
So
that, right?
voter
This
voter
was
voter suppression does
Hold
not
on, hold on,
equate.
wait. I need to explain this to my audience really quickly.
Okay.
So the precedent for this was already set in 1997 when a bunch of corrupt votes were cast in a different Miami mayoral election. So the bill also, if I'm not mistaken, uh, was put in place. It was Catherine Harris, elected in 1998, who oversaw the 2000 purge along with the state elections lawyer Emmett Mitchell. This was designed and set years beforehand. This doesn't prove that Bush was involved. We can talk about the fuck up that was this purge of like felons from their voter rolls, but that doesn't mean the entire election was stolen.
But do you are you aware of the emails that were sent from Bucky? I think his name is Bucky Mitchell to the database technologies, in which they
Was
told
it
them
where they
they
was
told
it
them
where
it
they
would be.
said that it was going to be a pretty broad brush?
They said it was going to be 70 to something like 70 to 80% accuracy, and Bucky Mitchell said to go ahead and do it. We would let the
Uh-huh.
election supervisors determine whether or not the whether or not whether or not that those names were matched. So you would get
Right.
somebody named.
That was hold on. Can I? Because that was totally a fuck up. You're right, but we're not
Well, I don't
arguing
know if it
whether or
was a
not
fuck
this
up. It was
this
on
we're
purpose.
not we're not arguing about whether or not this purge was a fuck up. We're arguing about whether or not something that happened 2 years before the election in one state somehow means that someone stole the entire election. This was outside the purview of the upcoming election, and as far as I'm concerned, this was fairly removed from Jeb Bush. He
Okay.
did obviously have some involvement as governor, of course, but at the end of the day, what we have is documented intent, and the reason for that was because they were trying to purge felons from the voter rolls. They wanted to stop voter fraud. To me, it sounds like typical conservative bullshit, but this doesn't mean that the whole election was rigged or stolen.
Well, it's
Do you
typical
understand what I mean?
now. It's typical now, and also you're neglecting Jeb. We don't you don't need Jeb Bush to be involved. Like Lincoln was assassinated without Jeb Bush's help. I mean, you don't need Jeb Bush's help for a
Huh?
conspiracy. Catherine Harris is co-chair of the Bush campaign while being Secretary of State. Jeb Bush blames her for it. This Bucky Mitchell guy worked under Catherine Harris. And the election in 2000 was a lot different than what was going on in 1998. I mean, there were affidavits that were provided for, at poll sites, and they weren't there. They would try to call these election supervisors on the phone. Nobody would answer. That was unusual.
So what you're doing right now, though, is the typical conspiracy thing, right?
No,
so
it's not a conspiracy. They
went
in court.
Hold on, wait.
They
stop,
went to court.
No, did they prove it in court? Did the court accept?
Of course they did, dude. Listen.
Well,
if you have a settlement,
what went to court?
They were sued under the Voting Rights Act. Now, a settlement is not necessarily a guilty plea.
We're not arguing whether or not that was a fuck-up. We're arguing on whether or not the entire election was stolen.
It was stolen. You just, by your own admission, there was voter suppression. It was stolen. Of course it was stolen.
Hey,
it's
buddy,
a stolen election.
There's arguably voter suppression for every election.
Okay, shoplifting happens all the time.
Hold on.
Shoplifting happens all the time. That doesn't mean it's not theft.
This doesn't prove the entire election was stolen. This was something that happened that was improper in one state of Florida that was signed into place by from the 1997 court precedent. This was something that, although was negative, that did have a bad outcome at the end of the day, seemed to more or less just be a policy to try and remove felons. Even if I granted all of that, that does not prove that the entire election was stolen. And the reason you're giving me conspiracies right now is because you're now telling me, well, this person had worked here and also here, and this person worked here and here. You're taking a couple facts and you're trying to construct an overall holistic narrative.
You were asking about a connection to the Bush campaign. It's not a conspiracy theory. If you Google conspiracy theory, Bush 2000, you're not going to find anybody. Not yet. I mean, if the three of you have your way.
If you really want to talk about anything, I think your stronger argument would probably be the butterfly ballots.
The butterfly ballots.
A bunch of stuff too.
The butterfly ballots. I don't even want to talk about the butterfly ballots. You know what I'd like to talk about is the Brooks Brothers riot. You have IRS tax records going directly from the Bush campaign to the members of that riot who stopped the recount.
That doesn't necessarily that.
That's literally a conspiracy. Once you have more than two people, you have a conspiracy.
We're not talking about conspiracy. That doesn't prove the election was stolen, buddy.
It was stolen because they stopped the recount. Dude,
the Supreme Court?
Terry McAuliffe, governor of Virginia, says it was stolen. If you got Hillary Clinton in her most honest moment...
Dude, you realize there are people on the other side of the aisle. You realize that Republicans accuse the Florida Supreme Court of being biased.
That sounds like a false equivalency. That sounds like a false
Florida
equivalency.
Supreme Court ordered, for example...
They also say COVID isn't real.
Without Gore even requesting it.
What was that again? I missed that last part. I missed that last part.
The Florida Supreme Court ordered undervotes to be recounted without Gore even requesting it.
Okay.
Second of all, if you want to talk about the Supreme Court decision, again, there was court precedent there. This wasn't just an on-the-whim thing. That you can read what they said.
The Supreme Court, I don't think there was a precedent for that. And actually, when they signed off on it, they said
maybe
you can't use this as a precedent.
Maybe precedent was the wrong word to use, but they did, as far as I'm concerned, have to abide by 3 U.S. code. I think I'm saying that correctly. I think
that had something to do with the deadline for the recount. But I mean, the felon vote, when you have 12,000 votes, listen, if 1 in 9 voters are going to pick Gore, 1 in 9 voters, black voters are going to pick Bush, that means 90% of black votes are going to Al Gore. Or right? Isn't that something like that? Yeah. So then you have what? 11% of registered voters are black. 44% of those people were on the felon purge. Now,
I recognize
based on the emails, it's not a fuck up. It's not a fuck up because they have emails where he said they were warned that this net is too wide. You're going to get false identities, and he said that's fine. We'll deal with it.
Who said that's fine?
Bucky Mitchell said that was fine. He worked under Katherine Harris. Katherine Harris was campaign co-chairman for the Bush campaign in Florida. I mean, dude, that's a smoking gun. Whether or not whatever precedent happened before then didn't. No, they knew what they were doing, and they did it. And I'll give you another example. What happened in St. Louis?
Hold on. Am I able to respond? Because I admit that sounds like there might be a little bit of shady shit there, but how come none of this was ever really proven?
What do you mean? It was proven. It was proven in court. They went to court. They were sued under the Voting Rights Act, and they fucking lost. They said, listen, like I said, if you settle...
The thing is that my big problem here is that you're trying to construct an overall story here. Like, there may have been something... Hold on. There may have been something that was conspiratorial even about the voter purge. But again, this took place a little bit, as far as I'm concerned, it was started before the election a little while back. And also they had no way of knowing in the future that the election was going to hinge on Florida by any means. So it just, I don't know. I feel like even if that were true, it doesn't prove that the entire election was stolen necessarily. Like, it's true that Florida is a important battleground state, but they had no way of knowing in the future that would happen.
Well, did you know there was a court case? There was a lawsuit. They were suing in court in St. Louis too, because they needed to extend.
I know
they
that they were sued.
In order to keep the polls open longer.
The thing is, I'm not trying to argue with you about whether or not this voter purge thing was good or bad. Hands down, it was completely 100% bad and mishandled in every way. I just think that taking that and stretching that out to, well, she wanted to help this person so that this could happen, so that this would work out, so that he could become president, so they wanted to... It starts to sound a little conspiratorial.
Do you think voter suppression is conspiratorial? I mean, do you think that we need voting rights?
I don't think voter suppression is conspiratorial, but I think that you implying that there was some deep deceptive manipulation here going on behind the scenes is, a little bit conspiratorial.
Well, this is the beginning of modern voter suppression. Also, began with the 2000 election.
I'm curious what your position is on butterfly ballots, because butterfly ballots also have been proven to cost at least 2,000 to 3,000 votes as well.
Oh, well, listen, dude, listen. I was saying this the other day. I mean, if people seem to be obsessed with these butterfly ballots, and I don't know why, but you could look at a pattern of conduct. And you know what, dude? There was a 2004, in the 2004 Kerry election, if you were to look up whether or not that was a conspiracy theory, that'll pop up. Because, there was
I know, they tried to do another voter purge, and then they...
Well, no, it wasn't a voter purge. It was when I remember it, it was like there was a blackout or something like that, and when they turned the machines on, these debolt machines, the numbers had changed and all this stuff. But, there was debolt machine problems in Florida.
That just sounds a little funky.
I know it does. Well, I don't have an opinion on that. So, but they did have voter machine problems like that, where Gore ended up with negative 16,000 votes, and then
there were a bunch of. The thing also is that not only were there irregularities here and there, but the reason people bring up butterfly ballots is because it also cost Al Gore a pretty good amount of votes, considering that at the end of the day, let's be realistic, as all the recounts were taking place. Now, in the places where they were able to complete the recounts, never did it show Al Gore actually leading. Bush always held a very slim lead there. And so the butterfly ballots, if you look, since Bush won by 537 votes or something, the butterfly ballots cost Al Gore anywhere between 2,000 to 4,000 votes.
Yeah, but the felon purge cost 12,000 votes. So, I mean, I think that's a wider problem, and it goes from different precincts to different precincts.
See, I think voter suppression is a wider problem, but I think that saying this person did this so that this could happen, so that they could manipulate the whole election because they somehow knew it was all going to hinge on Florida at the 2000. It just seems like a really big stretch. And what you're telling me right now, the reason I compare it to some right-wing conspiracy theories is because you're giving me examples of why did the power go out in this one time? Why did the machine suddenly change?
No, I gave you an example. No. I gave hold on. I gave you an example of an actual conspiracy theory. I'm making a distinction between what happened in 2004 with the blackouts and what happened in 2000. They never went to court, and as far as the butterfly ballots go, they went. I think they tried to go to court for the butterfly ballots, but it didn't work out. They settled a lawsuit over voter suppression, over the felon purge. Now, they did not admit guilt, but they agreed to make changes based upon what they were being sued for, which is the same thing as a guilty plea. So,
I mean, I agree. The thing is I'm not denying with you at the end of the day the voter suppression stuff at all. I know I've already said that 5 times.
So then,
I don't disagree with you on that at all.
We're arguing about whether or not voter suppression is the same thing as stealing. Then that sounds like what we're disagreeing about.
Yeah, it sounds like almost like a semantics thing.
I think that's stealing.
I think it's because when you bring up things like it's rigged or it's stolen, that does imply malintent.
Oh, there's malintent. There was
Well,
malintent.
okay. I think that Republicans have a lot of malintent when it comes to voter suppression.
Yeah.
But I think, again, thinking that this was coordinated to all somehow sway the election, it becomes more or less a grand conspiracy. And I think that's where we might be breaking away from. Because I think there's a great convo to be had about how bad that felon purge was. It was a massive fuck-up, 100%.
I don't think it was a fuck-up. I think it was on purpose.
Okay.
I mean, the emails prove that it was on purpose.
It doesn't. It proves that they thought they would handle it, and that they were aware that the net would be a bit too wide.
Yeah, they were told that.
It does not prove that. No, but it doesn't prove that they were trying to do this to somehow sway
They
the
had already used it to get Jeb Bush in office, because Jeb Bush had lost governor in his race for governor in '94. They made those changes before Jeb Bush's, and they used to call Jeb Bush Jeb Crow, apparently, down in Florida. But yeah, that's why. So they knew that it would work, and whether or not they knew that the election would hinge on Florida, I don't know. The polling data looked pretty. I think it was neck and neck from the beginning, and
It's
so
my
they
understanding
knew
that
every
this
state
voter purge
counts.
Excuse me. It's my understanding that the felon purge thing happened before the election began.
Yeah.
So it wasn't in the middle of the election all of a sudden, right? Do we know when did it take place versus how close to the election did it happen?
I don't know. I think they hired the company maybe in 1998. I think they might have hired the company in 1998, and they came up and they did it. They spent 2 years making these matches.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Well,
but
I think
that doesn't mean...
It's interesting because I did a lot of research on this, and I feel like I learned a lot about this thing too.
Yeah.
It's an interesting kind of. Are you being sarcastic with me right now?
No, it does sound like you did. I didn't know you'd know. Okay. I didn't know you know this Bucky Mitchell guy's name.
Well, I don't know Bucky Mitchell, but I did.
Well, I don't know him personally either, but I didn't know you'd know his name.
Yeah, I got you.
But did you know Did you hear the St. Louis thing though? They were going to try to extend voting times to accommodate all the voters by an hour, and then Bush sued St. Louis to stop that from happening.
I know a lot of weird shit happened with Bush suing to stop recounts, but at the same time, that kind of sounds just like the regular legal process, where the one candidate where it says they win, of course they want to stop the recounts, and then the one candidate that says they lost, they're suing to force the recounts. I guess I just get more concerned when I hear people, because I've heard people take it as far as to say, make it sound conspiratorial, even with the way the Supreme Court ruled.
Well,
I think that would be a bit of a stretch.
Did you hear? Did you know? You know what Scalia's justification for stopping the recount was, right? He said
wasn't it U.S. code?
It'll present. He said it will prevent. He said it will cause doubt in the legitimacy of the Bush presidency. In other words, before the recount even happened, and they had decided who was going to be president.
That's not what I'm reading at all here.
Scalia said that the reason they had to stop the recount was because it would cause it. Dude, that's in Wikipedia, I think. I don't know, or I think the Atlantic has a.
I'm reading from
has an oral history.
Britannica, and it says that. Let's see here. Hold on.
What were
So there was the majority opinion at oral arguments on December 11th.
Equal protection was one of them.
Bush's legal team asserted that the Florida Supreme Court had exceeded its authority by ordering the manual recount of undervotes, while Gore's team contended that the case, having already been decided at the state level, was not a matter for consideration at the federal level.
Okay, but there were two findings. One was equal protection, and the other one, I can't remember what
So there was
serious danger or something like that.
Wait. Why would you bring up? You realize by bringing up equal protection that supports my point.
Not really, because they could have sent it back down to Florida and then have them recount
that was what was
on a standardized recount. They could have did a standardized recount.
Joined by Associate Justices Antonin Scalia, yada, yada, yada.
And why did Scalia say they couldn't do that?
quote, surely when the Florida legislator empowered the courts of the state to grant appropriate relief, it must have meant relief that would have become final by the cutoff date of 3 USC 5, which is the Code 5, which talks about you have to stop any kind of voting conflicts and controversies at least 6 days before the electors vote. But also suggested that the safe harbor provision itself imposed a strict deadline beyond which no recounts could proceed.
And why
the
not?
Presidential election, the contest period necessarily terminates on the date sent by another U.S. code. He argued in addition that the recount order was invalid because it effectively created new election law in violation of Article 2, Section 1 of the U.S. Constitution. So I assume that's what you were talking about.
No.
And
There's a. It's something called imminent danger or something like that. And
you realize that the way that they were like recounting the votes was inconsistent on county to county.
Because they were only counting them in 4 counties, and that was the basis of the equal protection thing. And
weren't they only counting them in the counties where it had been challenged?
I'm not 100% sure, but they were only counting them in 4 counties. They hadn't finished with Miami-Dade, and that was because of the Brooks Brothers riot. That they had to where the Bush campaign literally physically stopped the recount. But there's just some law that says like there's some kind of imminent danger in continuing this recount. Like they wanted to do a standardized recount throughout Florida. And then Scalia said that they couldn't because it would cast doubt into the legitimacy of the Bush presidency, which I found to be pretty bizarre, because there was no Bush presidency yet. So it was almost like an assumption that it would win. But I mean, again, that's not what I would hinge any argument about whether or not it was rigged on. I would just hinge it on the voter purge, because that's where all the evidence is. I mean, that's where the emails are, and the Brooks Brothers riot, because there's
a much more middle ground that we can probably agree on here.
That we need to have voting rights legislation passed as immediately as soon as possible.
Fucking hell yeah. I'm not denying any of that shit. Hold on, I'm not. It's not looking too good, buddy.
What's up?
Antonin Scalia cast doubt Bush presidency. That's what I googled.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not really finding. Okay, hold on.
Well, I got it either out of an Atlantic article or Wikipedia has yeah. Oh, jeez.
Okay, so this I think is the quote directly. In response, Scalia first used his opinion to note that the majority, by acting as it did, showed it believes that the petitioner, Bush, had a substantial probability of success. That is one of the tests that a party before the court must meet in order to get a temporary order blocking a lower court ruling. Okay. Scalia then turned on the issue of potential harm to Bush from continued counting. One of the issues in the case, he said, is whether the votes being counted had been cast legally by Florida voters. If they were not, he said, their counting, quote, does threaten irreparable harm to petitioner and to the country by casting a cloud upon what he claims to be the legitimacy of his election.
Yeah, that's what I find fascinating.
So, this doesn't sound fascinating to me at all.
It's bizarre.
It sounds completely standard.
He
was talking about this. Scalia was obviously being swayed by Bush's legal arguments here. Mm-hmm. So I reject the idea that just if the election or the court didn't vote in the way we would have liked it to, that means it was rigged or anything. Second of all, this is just Scalia talking about, from Bush's perspective, that if the votes were illegal votes, it would threaten harm to the legitimacy of his election. That's true.
In Ginsburg's dissent, she
Wait,
What?
Wait.
What?
You need to answer that.
What do you mean?
This doesn't sound like you were making it sound like Scalia was like, well, I don't want anybody to be think that George Bush isn't like the most legit guy around,
That's
And
why,
then
dude. That's why Gore dropped
no,
out
and then
when he
when we
did.
read the quote, and then when we
Gore
actually
even
read the
thought
quote,
that.
it's pretty clear with the full context. What he's saying is, hey, if some of these votes being counted were illegal votes or cast illegally, that would threaten the legitimacy
Yes, it
of
would.
Bush's election.
It would. That's what he was worried about.
Yes, if they were cast illegally cast votes.
Well, there were no illegally cast votes as far as I know.
But he was referencing if there were.
If
He
there
literally
hypothetically
said,
were, well, was that
one of
even
the issues in the
presented in
case, he said,
court?
is whether the votes being counted had been cast legally by Florida voters. If they were not, he said, their counting, quote, does threaten irreparable harm to petitioner and to the country by casting a cloud upon what he claims to be the legitimacy of his election.
So he pulled something out of his ass and then addressed it. I don't understand
No,
how that's
not
a gotcha.
at all. No, he didn't pull anything out of his ass.
There were no illegal votes.
There was court precedent here, first of all, to stop the recount. With one, the U.S. law that they have to abide by, and two, the fact that they were inconsistent with how they were counting the votes in various different counties. So those are two different reasons why there were strong arguments for stopping the recount. There had already been a few recounts taking place. All of them had still shown Bush leading, although by slim margins. You know what I mean? At the end of the day, it went through the legal processes that were necessary, and Bush won the election. There were irregularities there, and thankfully things have changed greatly since the 2000 election, and things have only gotten better.
Well, not really. That Bucky Mitchell guy, the Bucky Mitchell guy we were talking about. I mean, hold on, when you want to talk about
happens, but
did you know? So then you do know in 2011, he created legislation. More voter suppression legislation. It was to limit early voting, and the other thing was to limit voter registration. And the voter registration actually went to federal court.
This is regular Republican bullshit.
But I know, but you
want to
keep
restrict
saying
people
that it's
from voting.
but it's not a fuck up. It's on purpose.
Okay, fine. So even if it's a Republican trying to suppress votes, it doesn't mean the entire election was rigged. If anything, it would
sure it was because it came down to Florida. It came down to Florida. I mean, Florida was rigged. So therefore, the election was rigged. But they had no way of knowing that. No, it did come down to Florida. It did come down.
But they had no way of knowing that. You see,
well, they don't have to know that to want every state that they can possibly get. It doesn't matter whether or not if it came down to Florida or not. Florida would have still been rigged. That's just how Florida elections work.
The argument isn't whether or not
Florida
was rigged. It's whether the whole election was, and that would imply
that is the whole election. The whole election came down to Florida.
And a deceptive attempt to manipulate the 2000 election from a 1997 thing that was set from court precedent when there was actual vote irregularities that allowed them to legally purge those voters, as shitty as it was. I don't know, man. Just sounds like a little bit of a stretch to me,
Florida. Your argument that Florida wasn't rigged is that New Hampshire wasn't rigged?
Admittedly, I do not know enough about New Hampshire, so
I'm just saying that's what I'm saying. I mean, you're saying that Oregon wasn't rigged, therefore but Florida was, therefore the election wasn't stolen. That can't really be the argument.
I think it's more or less the semantics argument and maybe a little bit of a
you guys, you Twitch streamers, man, and your semantics.
It is semantics. And also, I would be more than happy to actually meet you in the middle, and I think that there are a ton of valuable things we can learn
know where the middle
from
would be
the 2000
on
election thing. For example, that voter purge, perfect example of systemic racism.
Oh, yeah.
The way that sometimes, even if people have their intent to prevent voter fraud or whatever, and for that reason they want to keep felons from being able to vote, since in the state of Florida, felons are not able to vote. It's a stupid thing that thankfully was changed later. But again, that was following the law at the time.
Well, a law from 1868. They have they have to pay all their fines now or some shit like that if they want to vote.
And it's the perfect example of how voter, like, sometimes if you like try to stop one thing, you end up hurting a different group, even if it's inadvertent, right?
Oh, it's
But it
totally
wasn't. It
inadvertent.
was black people that were disproportionately affected, but it
It's a
wasn't
Jim
just
Crow
black people.
law.
There were a fuck ton of people
Yeah, but I
that
mean,
were
it was
negatively
a Jim
affected.
Crow era law. I mean, if you have a huge margin of black people in prison, I mean, in 1868 they passed this law. It was designed in
I'm
1868
definitely
to
glad
suppress
that the
votes.
people like they did find that like Republicans were somewhat responsible for like the voter purge thing and everything else. Jeb Bush was partially responsible too. But I just think that at the end of the day, claiming that the entire election was stolen or rigged, maybe it's a semantics thing. I think that we disagree a little bit with the intent thing. You seem to be ascribing intent, whereas I'm only able to go off of what was said, which I
Hmm.
know is kind of stupid. Like obviously we can speculate, but that's really all it is at the end of the day is
Well, listen.
speculation.
If
We
if
only
you own a
have
car
what's
company,
documented.
if you own a car company, and I tell you, hey, this Pinto is gonna your Pinto you're making, it's gonna explode if somebody rear ends it, and you sit there and you calculate, if you sit there and calculate, well, it's gonna cost us less in lawsuits than it is to pull these cars, so let's just keep the cars out on the road. I mean, you could sit there and argue about intent all day, but you're probably gonna go to jail for that. I mean, it's just this whole thing. The guy sat there and was told, "Hey, this thing is too wide. We can narrow these margins, and we can make this voter purge
Did
more
they say that
accurate."
they could? I think
Oh
that they
yeah, yeah, they
simply
could.
said
No,
that
they were
that I
specifically
thought it was
told.
because they were using weren't they using an older technology?
No. The database technologies told them that we can narrow these out, and they go, "No, we want to keep this at about 70% accurate." Because and I don't think those guys do voter felon purges or get involved in elections anymore over this because
All right, well,
they blamed the election officials. Jeb Bush blamed Catherine Harris. The
yeah,
buck
there was
stopped
blame
everywhere else.
all around, and it's
So
really because there were a lot of moving pieces here, and
and
I
as
don't
far as
think that
Jeb Bush,
any
I
one
don't
person was
expect.
responsible for
I would
anything.
never expect to catch Jeb Bush doing anything. And I don't understand. And I remember hearing these debates earlier, and there we go. Since you don't have a connection to Jeb Bush, then you don't really have a case. That's a little disingenuous because, like, Nixon didn't know they were going to break into Watergate. Ronald Reagan didn't know they were selling guns. They just said, do whatever you have to do and make sure that it gets done and leave me out of it. Because that's the whole, any notion of crime, any idea of crime, whoever's in charge is always going to be insulated. That's like how the mob works. So you're never going to
I
find
mean, but he did face consequences, right?
Jeb Bush
That some Republicans were held responsible for
by Donald Trump. Donald Trump
the
probably
the
talked some
bullshit.
shit up to him about it. I don't
But
know, but I don't know what Jeb Bush ever faced consequences for that. Nobody was
I think he
prosecuted.
did. I think he faced consequences in court, right?
All I know is the NAACP sued them. They initiated some changes, and now they're just trying to do new shit.
Right.
So that's all I know.
Well, honestly, I'll be honest. Yeah, I think that this was a interesting discussion. Sorry if I went a
Yeah,
little hard on you here and there, but
no,
you know,
that's
I
all right, dude.
I think that it was an interesting talk, and I think that you've posed some good questions here. You kind of had me thinking a little bit, thinking a little bit more about this. Although I did dig in pretty deep to this over the
Good,
past couple of
good,
days
good.
too.
I just, where did, it's just, where did you get this idea from? I mean, what brought this up in the first place?
Honestly, I saw some lefty debates where people were talking about this and honestly making claims that were a little bit more bombastic than yours.
Well, of the three of you, you seem to be the only one willing to have a conversation about it, so I'll give you kudos for that.
Thanks, man.
All right.
Yeah, is there anything else you disagree with me on that you want to talk about? I saw another DM where you said I was funnier when I was right wing or something. I thought maybe there was some
No.
other...
We do, like we roast people, and we did the Vouch. We did your debate with Vouch over Kevin Hart, and
Uh-huh.
yeah, we ripped up Vouch a little bit because Vouch had
I
some
did pretty
really
badly in
bad.
that debate, though.
No, you didn't. You didn't look that good, but Vouch. First of all, Kevin Hart did apologize, and second of all, that study doesn't say that racist or that homophobic jokes create homophobia. So that study just said it makes homophobes more comfortable In the story I gave, this is to give an example of how what the study is saying. So my co-host was doing this dark comedy show at this club, and this guy after him was saying some homophobic stuff. And this woman next to me, now I was laughing at it because it was wrong what he was saying, but the woman next to me was not laughing. She was going like nodding her head, going, "That's true, that's true." And that's essentially that study that he cited. That's essentially what it said. Like the guy who's not homophobic is going to laugh at it, or is going to
because they
isn't going to be
recognize it
changed.
more.
Isn't well? My mind wasn't
Back to
changed.
what I was saying is,
I didn't become.
Doesn't that go back to a little bit like what I was saying? Is that like it's that you laugh at it most likely because you recognize the absurdity of it.
Oh yeah. That's the whole point of it. Is it's so wrong that you laugh at it. But plus, it's just it's a good joke. Jokes are just magic, card tricks.
I don't know. I think that jokes definitely can normalize some pretty negative behaviors.
No, I think, but with the study he was citing,
day, my friend.
Okay, well, it's just the study he was citing. He seems to have misunderstood that study, but I wasn't turned into a homophobe. That's all I'm saying.
That's good.
But anyways, cool, man. It was cool talking to you.
Yeah, man. Well, have a good rest of your day. All right. And
all right.
Keep preparing for the end times. Okay.
You too.
Amen.
All right. Later.